Welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight we rewatched your number 5 seed Indiana Hoosiers defeat the number 10 seed Kent State Golden Flashes 81-69 to advance to the Final Four. For the first time since 1992, the Hoosiers will face Oklahoma and Hollis Price in Atlanta next Saturday night after the number 2 seed Sooners defeated the 12th seeded Missouri Tigers earlier tonight. Holy smokes, going back to the Final Four. Here, you want a few numbers to make you feel even better? This was Indiana's 11th Elite Eight game. The Hoosiers are now 8-3 all-time in the Elite Eight. And as we look ahead, Indiana 5-2 all-time in the Final Four. And as we know, when the Hoosiers reach the NCAA Championship game, they always take care of business, holding a 5-0 all-time mark in the National Championship game. But I know that I'm getting ahead of myself. You have to excuse me, just a little bit excited. It's been a while since we've been back to the Final Four, and I just want to get through this postgame show so that I can go join everybody down on Kirkwood for what I'm sure is an epic celebration. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time since Calbert and Greg and Alan and Damon and Eric were wearing the cream and crimson, Indiana going back to the Final Four where we belong, and the Hoosiers did it tonight by delivering one of the greatest shooting performances in school history, both by the numbers and certainly based on the stakes. And we are going to break it all down for you on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Scott Caulfield and Chris Williams. They were both at the game tonight, and they're going to be joining us here in just a few minutes to give their takeaways from the game. But let's start this show the way that we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. You know, and in a game where you make 15 three-pointers and you have so many runs like Indiana did, there's so many ways that you could go with this, but I'm going to go back to the second half, late in the second half. And you'll recall, Indiana built a 20-point lead in the second half. Fife, Hornsby, Fife, knocking down three-pointers. But credit to Kent State. Every time Indiana would push the lead out to 16 or 18 or 20, Kent State would just keep coming back. They didn't shoot very well tonight, maybe didn't play as well as they wanted to, but they sure played tough, and they wouldn't go away. And, this time, Indiana gets that 20-point lead. Coverdale goes out hurt, and we'll talk about that because, goodness gracious, that is worrisome. But Kent State charges back. They go on a 9-0 run, led a lot by Antonio Gates, who is just a tremendous athlete and really, really played well for Kent State tonight. And so we're sitting there. It's a 59-52 game, and all of a sudden, with about 6.5 minutes to go, you can feel Kent State's crowd getting into it. Their players starting to build confidence, and Indiana gets the ball on offense and looks like they don't know what to do. Hoosiers are passing it around. No one really wants to take charge. Doesn't seem like anybody wants the ball. Eventually, the ball gets swung around to Dane Fife. And what was interesting is right on the possession before, when Antonio Gates is shooting free throws, Fife was going around to everybody, and you could see clapping and saying "let's go," trying to get everybody going because he could tell that this was a big moment. So the ball gets swung around to him, and as we know, Dane has not been a guy who's always been ready for the big offensive moments throughout his career, but this season as a senior has really emerged as a more confident offensive player. And this was his moment to shine, and he stepped up and drained it. It was a huge shot. It was Indiana's 15th three-pointer of the game. So the last three-pointer that they would make, it stopped some of that Kent State momentum. And again, in a possession where nothing was going well, they needed someone to step up. It was Dane Fife. Not a guy that we usually think of for stepping up offensively, but tonight he leads Indiana with 17 points, 5 of 6 from downtown, and it wasn't just offense. His effort and toughness on defense were really important. And the story of this game is going to be Indiana making 15 three-pointers, but it was another really solid defensive performance from one of the nation's best defensive teams. And, all night long, Dane Fife was there, keying it, making big plays, none bigger than that three-pointer that extended the lead back out to 10, and really it felt like gave Indiana the momentum they needed down the stretch to seal this victory, win their Elite Eight game, and go to the Final Four. Great performance from Dane Fife. All right, our banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Homefield Apparel. Now, look, you may not have ever heard of Homefield Apparel, and that's fine. It's only the year 2002, and Homefield isn't even going to be founded for another 16 years. But in marketing and sales, this is what we call planting the seed. So when 15-year-old Connor Hitchcock reached out to me earlier this week about running some ads for the apparel company he's planning to found when he graduates IU, I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Reach people when they're experiencing an emotional high, like their favorite team making 15 three-pointers in an Elite Eight game, and you'll attach positive feelings to the brand for decades to come. So here's what to look out for. In the year 2018, you're going to start hearing about a company called Homefield Apparel. They're going to claim that they have the most comfortable T-shirts and hoodies available anywhere, and they're going to be right about that. And they're also going to have old IU logos and brand marks that haven't been seen in decades. For example, they're going to bring the Bison back. Yeah, did you even know that Indiana once had a Bison logo? I'm telling you, it's going to be incredible. You'll be wondering why there wasn't a company like Homefield Apparel all along, which is a valid question. But they do eventually show up, and they want to reward Assembly Call listeners for keeping them in mind for almost 2 decades between now and then. So they're offering a discount. Write this down somewhere. Use the promo code Assembly20, and you will get 20% off your entire order. That's Assembly20 for 20% off your entire order. Again, the name is Homefield Apparel. Don't forget it. Start saving up now because you're going to want to order a lot of stuff. All right. Well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. I hope that they're outside of the arena and that we can actually hear them. Let's go to Chris Williams first. Chris, your thoughts on this Indiana victory?
Well, I'm a freshman at IU right now, and so this is, this is what my parents who were at IU in the 76 season and my aunt who was at IU during the 81 season, I'm finally feeling what they had talked about and the experience and the emotion of reaching a Final Four. I was at the game Thursday night against Duke. I lost my voice, so I'm just now getting it back. But again, it's probably going to fade out because I was screaming my head off. My sister and I were sitting together at the game. My parents were at the game as well. It's overwhelmingly emotional right now. I didn't know how we would come out after that emotional win against Duke. I was concerned we would come out flat and kind of let this Kent State team get ahead of us. And when Fife hit that first three, I was thinking, okay, this could be a good night, because I know Fife was especially upset after we lost last year to Kent State in an upset. And unfortunately saw the end of Kirk Hastings' career last year. Kind of in that way, it was kind of a sad thing. But I'm still shaking right now, still overwhelmingly emotional. It's going to be a while for me. I hope I can get back in time to go down to Kirkwood and go to Nick's and eat some of that pizza at the English Hut that I keep hearing Dick Enberg refer to on the broadcast. So I heard about that. So yeah.
All right, let's go over to Scott Caulfield. Scott, your thoughts on Indiana's victory?
I mean, I really wish we would have pushed the ball inside more and not taken so many threes. I mean, Jerod just, he needs to get more touches. Dude, what am I talking about? Final Four! Final Four! 10 years! Suck on it, Enberg. I know it's been a long time. This is awesome. I was at this game. I flew back from Houston just a couple days ago. My dad and I, just quick story, my dad and I started going to basketball games together in 1986. And then the first time we ever went to a tournament game together was last year, because it was the first time in a while. IU was a protected seed. We're a 4 seed. We flew all the way out to San Diego. We get there. It was the first game of the session. We lose to Kent State. That sucks. We stayed around for a little bit of the second game. We're there on Saturday and on Sunday. We end up getting a flight back earlier, flying TWA. Great airline. I mean, that thing is going to stand the test of time, 100% sure. Their hub in St. Louis, just fantastic. And it sucked. So I'm in Houston now teaching, and I wasn't able to make it down for the game against Duke. But when they won, I called up my dad. He had a ticket, and he and I went to the game, and it's like revenge against Kent State. I mean, this game was awesome. I remember having a moment in the second half thinking, it's almost this weird thought. It's like all I've wanted for so long is to go back to the Final Four. I remember grew up in Bloomington. I remember going down to Aristotle's, which turns into TIS and then TIS Music, and now it's like, I don't know, a Chinese place or something. Oh, I mean, it might be. Sorry. I mean, I'm assuming it'll still be Aristotle's tomorrow. But at some point, I just feel like maybe that business won't stay in business. I remember going down there like in, high school in like 96, 95, and seeing them have, clearance stuff from the 92 Final Four and thinking like, God, when am I going to get to buy my own Final Four stuff? And then in this game, I had that moment thinking like, oh my God, it's actually going to happen. And almost this weird, like, I'm not even sure, like in a weird way, like, I don't know if I want it to happen, because like, what if if we win a title, like now I've kind of gotten the only thing that I've wanted for so long. But then I thought like, oh my God, I don't want to sit here and watch us lose a game. And then we came back. I mean, we can dig into the numbers, dig into the game, but my God, what a game. So much great shooting. And I mean, this is, I think back to, it's almost like last week, I was thinking about the IU LSU game where we played Shaquille O'Neal, and we had the worst start to that game where it's like I would have restarted my Super Nintendo game of, NBA, the Blazers versus the Bulls. But this is like the complete opposite. Like you could not have started a better game this way. My gosh, just awesome. And Chris, good to see you at the game, man. Thanks for the beer.
It was awesome. And there's so many different angles and ways that we can take it. But I think we've got to start with Tom Coverdale. Because while Dane Fife had the biggest play of the game and, was named the player of the game by the broadcast, to me, what Tom Coverdale did in the first half was just unbelievable. And it's easy to sometimes forget, what guys do in the first half, especially if maybe they don't play a lot in the second half or they don't do as much in the second half. But Tom Coverdale, and this is not hyperbole at all, had one of the best first half performances or performances in a half by a guard in an NCAA tournament game in IU history. I mean, he was awesome. He had a stretch in the first half where he scored 10 straight points all by himself. I think he had 5 assists in the first half, no turnovers. And I thought that, especially early, his just dogged desire to push the ball and be aggressive and get into the teeth of the defense was so big because not only did it force Kent State's defense to collapse and he was able to find Fife and he was able to find Hornsby for 3-pointers, but then at other times he would just drive right down the lane and score because when that big burly body gets going, as we know, it's hard to stop. And so I thought he was fantastic in the first half and was such a big reason why Indiana was so good offensively. But his injury in the second half is going to be the black cloud that lingers over this game. And I know we're all ecstatic and we're going to the Final Four and all that stuff, and we should feel that way. But I'm concerned about what this team is going to be able to do now that we're there if Coverdale can't play at all. Because I think we all love Donald Perry's potential. I don't think he's ready to be your lead guard, lead ball handler in a Final Four type situation. So, Scott, as obviously we can probably spend some more time later kind of, talking about the bad stuff and Coverdale's injury, but I wanted to at least acknowledge it off the top because obviously it's not even in the back of our mind, it's in the front of our minds. But let's at least talk about his play first because I thought this was as good as we've seen Tom Coverdale play in the first half of this game.
No, he looked awesome. I remember 2 years ago with my wife, we were, going to games and it's like you would chant to get Coverdale in the game. Like he was the guy who you would cheer when Knight put Coverdale in. It's like, because now we got the game in hand because he was the last guy on the bench. So to see him turn into this is really amazing. And, everything you said is true. I'll take it kind of the other angle. You saw how important he was when he wasn't there, right when he goes out. The first 4 plays after that, Donald Perry looked like an absolute mess. I mean, he just looked like a mess. He came out there, got double teamed. We had Dane Fife had a bad play. Then we had a 10-second violation. Then we had a backcourt. I mean, it was just 4 straight turnovers. So you saw how important he was when he was out. But I would just say the whole backcourt was fantastic. I mean, you mentioned, Dane Fife. We were expecting that shooting. I mean, you do have to remember Dane Fife, took 143s this year and hit 47%. He was 14th in the country in 3-point shooting percentage. And that's on a pretty good sample size. And then, Kyle Hornsby hitting 44% on 161 threes. But, Hornsby, 4 for 5 from 3. Dane Fife, 5 from 6. And these aren't numbers you'd expect at everybody, but they were great. And then, I will give it to Hornsby too. In that second half, when Coverdale went out, the only time that Kent State made a real push, you had Hornsby dive to save the ball on a bad Jerod Jeffries pass to give it to Dane Fife. Newton blocks, Hornsby comes back, hits a long 2, and then that's the closest that Kent State ever got. So really, I mean, I'm with you on Coverdale's fantastic, but I think the entire backcourt was awesome, which is, I mean, for us to be up by 20 and the entire game, Jerod Jeffries has 10 points, the backcourt has to be awesome. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, it's funny. We're 14 minutes into the show, and we finally, really mentioned Kyle Hornsby, and he had 16.7 assists and went 4 for 5 from downtown. It was that kind of offensive game where so much happened that guy gets third billing. But you're right. The 3 that he hit in the second half was, he hit many threes, but that one that he hit that kind of killed a Kent State run, that was kind of the theme of the game, Chris. And I'm curious kind of how it felt in the arena. Indiana would have these, look, Indiana started out great. They make their first, 8 or 9 threes of the game. But even before the first TV timeout, Indiana hit 5 threes. They're up 15-5. And essentially that lead is what they nursed for the rest of the game. They would push it up to 20, and then Kent State would battle back. And Indiana would push it back up, and Kent State would battle back. And I feel like if this game had gone for 120 minutes, you would have just seen the same thing, but Indiana probably wins by 10. It was it was just written in the stars tonight. How did it feel in the arena? Did it feel like there were just kind of these massive swings of momentum? Because that's certainly how it felt watching it on TV.
It did. Gates was really kind of beating us up down low. He went for 22 points. And I think that, coming in, the target really was Trevor Huffman. He had 17 against Pitt. He has 20 against Alabama. He's held to 8 tonight.
Don't talk trash to Dane Fife, Trevor Huffman.
Right. I thought the defense on Huffman was tremendous. But, yeah, early on, I mean, the feeling was when we were up by 20 at one point, my feeling was, okay, we need to just put it right to their throats. And I think that we kind of let up on the gas a couple times. And I don't think the rotation adjustments were too bad with that. I mean, we've already mentioned Donald Perry. He plays 17 minutes, only has 1 turnover, but he doesn't look – when he was out there and when Kent State started trapping, there was some concern because the turnovers kept racking up. And my big concern coming into this game was we had 23 turnovers against Duke, and we had 15 tonight. We got to clean that up against Oklahoma. We got to clean that up, and that was my concern. The fact that we got out of that Duke win with 23 turnovers it was amazing. But the crowd was energetic. I mean, we knew what was on the line. Everybody there. It was a huge Indiana crowd, and there was a lot of Kent State fans. You're talking about a regional matchup here, but it was overwhelming. It was the crowd really got the players back on track. I think when we kind of let things slip. I was really concerned, and I was going berserk at, we're about the 6:30 mark. We're down by 7, or we're up by 7, excuse me. And then Fife comes down and hits a 3 to puts us up back up at 10. That to me was the big dagger because, when Coverdale goes out, they go on an 11-0 run, and we're like, oh my gosh, are we going to really have to put this all on Donald Perry from here on out? And I think, we need Coverdale against Oklahoma because, we cannot expect Perry to be playing 30 minutes in the game. It's just not reasonable for him. And you can, the game plan going in with Oklahoma is going to be if Perry has to play a lot. We saw that, his free throw, he had the most free throw attempts of anybody on the team tonight. He only hit 4 out of 10. So that's a liability on the floor. So the crowd really, I think, willed the team to win in a lot of ways, but the shooting did it more than anything. I mean, when you hit 15 out of 19 threes, you're going to win a lot of ball games, especially when the other team only hits 2 out of 14. That's just the way it's going to be.
And Scott, I think we need to, mention here before we get out of the first segment, we got to give a tip of the cap to Mike Davis. I mean, we are now, 2 years removed from Mike Davis taking over for Bob Knight, obviously in one of the most fraught situations that a coach has ever stepped into, especially a first-time head coach at the college level like Mike Davis. And here in his second season, Indiana, wins a share of the Big Ten title in the regular season. He's got the 5th best defense in the country and the 26th best offense. And, I feel like tonight the story coming out of this game is going to be the offense, and rightfully so when you go 15 of 19. But defensively, I just thought Indiana was rock solid for most of the night. Gates had his moments, obviously. That guy's an elite athlete. He clearly has a future as a professional athlete somewhere in some sport. But for the most part, we saw the really connected team defense, the tough defense from Indiana that we want to see. And I thought Indiana's game plan was good. I mean, Indiana basically spread them out. And, obviously it's been a transition for all of us to watch more set plays after 3 decades of the motion offense. But, it worked, especially when Coverdale was out there. And I thought Indiana really, I just thought, even with some of the bench guys struggling, some of the rotation decisions and just the plays that Davis called, again, for a guy, in his second year, taking over a really tough spot, to have this team in the Final Four, I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling that we're in this spot. I don't think any of us thought that we would be here, 18 months ago.
No. I mean, he had a really good moment in the end of the first half. It got to 34-20, which is still 14-point lead, but Kent State had a little 4-point run, or a 6-0 run. He calls timeout, and it kind of quells it. And then we kind of get back into our rhythm. And so he had a great time out there. No, and he's been a calming influence. And, this game was an ultimate trap game. I mean, this game also kind of reminded me of, it was only about 20 years ago from this point where you had the 1980, USA Olympic team where they beat Russia. Everyone forgets, that was the bronze, that was not the gold medal game. USA still had to go out and beat Finland. enough so, like, literally, I was thinking it was, I think it was Norway, but I got on my computer, AOL.com. It's great. CBS had some ads for him today. Check it out. It's a great website. I went to http://AOL.com/hockeystats.html and realized it was Finland that the USA played. But no, I mean, that is like a coach, you need to get the game up for this, because if we beat Duke and then lose to Kent State, it's still like, hey, that was a fun run. But you almost feel like you left a little bit on the table. I mean, Chris and I were there. A lot of fans were there, and we all felt like this was our chance to get to a Final Four. Like, everything kind of lined up for us. But no, he's been.
To that point, though, Scott, maybe that's why it was a blessing to play Kent State, who had beaten us the year before, to make sure that there was no letdown.
Lined up.
Yeah.
But I mean,
and you knew Fife was going to be ready to go after what Huffman, said about he and his dad. So, you had him. You
saw in defense what Davis had them doing. I mean, early on, they were switching everything, which was a great idea. And you had moments where Fife was guarding Antonio Gates and he stopped him. Enough so that I have a feeling Antonio Gates is like, dude, I just can't play basketball anymore. And he might play another sport. I don't know, but I think Fife might have scared him out of basketball for a while. But, he saw it on offense too. Like, it was it's different than what we saw under Knight. But this kind of, 3-and-D, I don't even know if that's a saying or anything, but kind of just spreading the court, having shooters surrounding kind of one big man in the middle. I mean, it's definitely something I don't think it can work in the pros. Like, I definitely don't think you can win in the pros by shooting a bunch of threes. Like, there's no way a team's going to put a bunch of shooters out there, and you're not going to have big guys who are 6'9" and 7 foot shooting threes in the NBA. Don't be crazy. But for here in college, I think it can definitely work. But no, you see Davis kind of leaning into what this team has. He has a lot of good shooters, a lot of interchangeable parts on defense, and he's playing to their strengths.
Yeah, no, he definitely is. Okay, coming up as we continue our breakdown of Indiana's victory over Kent State. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to the Final Four. I will point out the meaningful moments that you might have missed, then we will go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from this game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys, Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
I don't know who this Christian Watford is and what epic buzzer beater he's talking about.
But 7-year-olds.
It sounds awesome.
What are you doing?
It sounds awesome. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Chris Williams from IU Artifacts and Scott Caulfield from Crimson Cast. We are breaking down Indiana's Elite Eight victory over Kent State. Guys, it's time for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. And, we are one game removed from Jerod Jeffries delivering one of the best performances of his career against Duke. He was fantastic. And, he didn't need to be the lead dog tonight. He's obviously been Indiana's best player all year long. But, when you had Fife shooting like he was and Hornsby shooting like he was and Tom Coverdale just being the engine of the offense like he was, this was not a night for Jerod Jeffries to shine. And his numbers were relatively muted. I think he had 10 points, 7 rebounds, just didn't get a lot of touches on offense, frankly. But, boy, a couple of the plays that he made were huge. So you remember the banner moment that I talked about with Fife making that three. Jeffries would come back and make one a couple of possessions later. But I thought, actually, the single best individual sequence of any player was in the second half, and I'm trying to remember. It was at the 5:26 mark of the second half, so it was right after that last big run that Kent State had made, and after Fife's 3-pointer, Jeffries gets the ball inside and he gets blocked. And a lot of times when that happens to a big guy, you kind of see him run down the court a little bit slow to get back on defense. He turns around and hustles back on defense. I don't know if it was Gates. I think it was somebody else. Had a little reverse. He went down the baseline on the left side, tried to go up on the right side, and Jeffries blocks the shot. That's how quickly he got back down there. Then he hustles the other way and gets a dunk, and it put Indiana up 12. And, even though Kent State would obviously keep playing, that felt like the kind of play that just kind of sucked the life out of him. Because it's like Fife's doing all this stuff and Hornsby's doing all this stuff, and oh, yeah, there's a lottery pick out there that can just make incredibly athletic plays, and he plays hard, and he has a high basketball IQ. So it's almost like Jerod Jeffries kind of reminding everybody, hey, don't forget who the best player on the court is, because he didn't have the numbers, but he's still Jerod Jeffries. And, Chris, that to me, I mean, you saw in that stretch what makes Jerod Jeffries special is that he's got all the physical gifts, But man, he just, at the end of the day, he's a smart basketball player who plays hard, and I loved seeing that from him, and it's why he's become just such a popular Indiana player.
Well, Jerod's only a year older than me, and when we were both in middle school at Tri-North Middle School here in Bloomington, I was on the 7th grade team and he was on the 8th grade team. And when we did 8-7 versus 8th, I had the luxury of having to guard Jerod Jeffries in middle school. And talk about a guy who had a skill set back then when he was only 6 feet tall. You got to remember, this kid in high school, he didn't play his freshman year when North won the title in '97. And then he grows like 6 inches his the summer before his sophomore year, and he explodes on the scene. And he has this tremendous gift of being 6'10", but having the skills as a guard. When he was a senior in high school, when he took North to the state title game against Zach Randolph from Michigan State, he brought the ball up the floor the majority of the time. He was a guard in a 6'10" body. And we saw that on display here, his ability to step out and shoot. But his defensive intelligence is unbelievable. His ability to know where to be at the right time defensively is remarkable. And he to what you said, he was at the right place at the right time after time after time again. And he made the defensive stops, which was needed, because I was wondering throughout this game how Kent State was going to adjust with the bigger size, interior play of Indiana, because Antonio Gates is tremendously gifted, but could he handle the size inside, whether it was Newton, whether it was Odell, whether it was Jeffries? But Jeffries really, in a lot of ways, was a playmaker, even when he didn't have to be an offensive threat.
Yeah. Scott, what were your thoughts on Jerod's performance tonight?
No, it's funny. You hit the exact moment that I was kind of lining up for, the moments you might have missed, and that was the one that Jeffries made the block, ran the court, and then made the dunk. I mean, that showed he was still very active defensively. He didn't have a great game. His first couple touches, got to go up here. Like, I even wrote down, he was off to a rough start. Like, had a turnover, a travel, another bad pass to him that he threw out of bounds. Like, he started off rough and never really, he didn't have kind of a game where he took things over offensively. He wasn't getting a lot of touches. They didn't need to get it to him. But to your point, like, he always stayed connected, and he always stayed active throughout the game. And he was great defensively. And then offensively, when he needed to, he stepped up.
Yeah, I mean, he played 39 minutes, so even if he wasn't always at the center of the action offensively, he was kind of the rock that was out there for Indiana. Now, the 4 turnovers are a little bit of a concern, and that's obviously something that I think he's going to be asked to carry a heavier offensive load, I think, in other games. So he's going to have to clean up those turnovers. But overall, it was, just a good game for him. And the other play that I wanted to point out, which goes all the way back to the first half, and again, it can sometimes be hard to remember what happens early in a game. But again, Indiana built their 10-point lead before the first media timeout and essentially just nursed that lead for the rest of the game. And I thought there was one play early that was just really indicative of what kind of night it was going to be for Indiana, and started on the defensive end. It was clearly very important for Dane Fife to play his physical, annoying style of defense. And, when he was matched up on Antonio Gates, which he was, early, really didn't want to let him catch the ball down low. Because that's the thing with Gates. He's not an incredibly skilled shooter, but he's got that big body, and he is skilled around the basket. And if he gets position on you, even though he's a little bit undersized, for a big man, it's going to be difficult. And so let's play. I think it's like the 15-50 mark of the first half. Fife's bodying him up, not letting him get the ball down low. He pokes the ball out. Hornsby grabs it to get it for a steal. They get it to Coverdale, and Coverdale immediately gets it and goes. We've seen some point guards in Indiana history. We've seen it before Tom Coverdale. I'm almost positive we will see it after Tom Coverdale. Point guards that just aren't quite as assertive, and the coach has to tell him to push the ball up. With Coverdale, man, you do not have to do that. That is one thing. He is aggressive and confident, and he just got it and went. And he's aggressive. He drives in. The defense collapses. He kicks it out to Kyle Hornsby, who's running the floor. Boom, it's 15-4. Indiana's 5 of 5 from downtown. And, Chris, that right there, just that little stretch was what kind of night, certainly what kind of first half it was for Indiana, but really I thought that kind of went the whole night, where they just played tough physical team defense, and offensively they got it out. When the offense was going well, they penetrated, they drew the defense, and, either the guy who was penetrating had a lane to the basket and he would keep going, or we would kick it out and find the open man. I mean, it was just that over and over all night long.
Yeah, they spread the floor really well, and the inside-outside game was definitely working because there were times when, whether it was dumping down to Odell or Jeffries, and they would collapse on them. It was not a good game plan for Kent State to try to do that throughout the game, because once Indiana's kept hitting them, they went 8 for 8. You could see Heath was just kind of struggling because their whole game plan had been completely thrown out the window.
15 for 19 from 3 will do that to you.
Yeah. It's interesting, their two best players played every minute of the game, Trevor Huffman and Antonio Gates, and you could really see toward the end they had nothing left. And that was a big indicator because the shots were not falling. The threes were not falling the way they had been in previous games. You're talking about a Kent State team that offensively is very similar and actually has a better offensive rating to Indiana. They're 8th in the country in offense, total offense. So, and not a bad 3-point shooting.
What is offensive rating? Is this that stat that Galen found for us a couple weeks ago?
Nerd.
Is this what Galen found in 1998? Is that the stat that we're talking about?
Yeah, I looked it up through
points, rebounds, assists. That's all you care about.
Yeah. Let's just keep it here. Keep it amongst ourselves. Don't let this get out. These new advanced
stats. This could be a big moneymaker. We don't want anybody named Ken taking it over for us. But I really think, Kent State, they hadn't lost since January 9th. They just got worn down. In Indiana, the 3 after 3, that'll do it to you. But the defense and being able to bounce back when Kent State got really close, Kent State really didn't have an answer. They didn't have an answer all night because their most prolific scorer in school history was held to 8 points. And you can't expect Antonio Gates to do it all.
Man, it was just nice after playing from behind so much in that Sweet 16 game against Duke to just come out and assert ourselves right from the beginning. One last, Scott, I want to get your meaningful moments. The last one that I wanted to mention is, and this was just kind of one in passing, toward the end of the game, Jeff Newton gets in there, and he comes out of nowhere for this rebound. And I just want to say about Jeff Newton, this is a guy, he's kind of developing before our eyes a little bit, improving, getting more comfortable. I don't know what he's going to be able to contribute in the Final Four. Hopefully he's able to step forward and, do something in that Oklahoma game, especially if Coverdale can't play. But I'm not sure in my time watching Indiana basketball that I have seen a guy who is more graceful rebounding out of his area than Jeff Newton. Like, he will just come out of nowhere, gliding through the air and get these rebounds. And it's like, I don't know where he came from, but that was a majestic rebound by Jeff Newton. So that was just that was a good play, and hopefully it's a sign of things to come, not just in his future, but even, heck, who knows, by this weekend. Scott, what moment stood out to you?
I mean, you got to rename the segment for Newton, the majestic moments you might have missed. I mean, that's really good, a majestic. I have 2 moments that he might have missed. One is, he had his moments of struggle. We talked about Donald Perry, but I will say this. End of the game, a minute 10 to go. We're only up 73-65. Kent State has gotten under that 10-minute barrier. Perry goes up and hits 2 free throws. He was 4 for 10 from the line from the game, so did not have a good shooting night from the line, but those were key free throws that got us back up by 10, 75-65. Just want to give a shout-out to Donald there. But my biggest moment that you might have missed, and I think one of the biggest keys to this game, is how important it was for us to play in Rupp Arena. Not the Kentucky piece was this close to Bloomington. Chris mentioned it. Like, my dad who lives in Bloomington, he was like, hey, we're going down. Like, this was, one of the best regional sites we can get to. You look at us down the stretch this year, something we talked about in all the assembly calls to wrap up the season. We finished 1 for 4 on the road in the Big Ten. We lost at Minnesota. We won at Michigan, who was one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. And then we lost at Michigan State. We lost at Illinois. I mean, we really didn't have a really good quality road win all year. Maybe Iowa, but that was back February 5th. I mean, most of our road games were losses. We lost at Miami. We lost at Southern Illinois. We lost a neutral game to Marquette. I guess the Texas game was neutral, but that was, in November. We just didn't play well on the road this year. So to have basically a semi-home game in a regional final was just awesome. And it's funny, we were all pissed off 2 weeks ago that we won the Big Ten. We're co-champs, but yet Illinois and Ohio State got 4 seeds. We got a 5 seed. Something weird like that Ohio State one feels just like it's not going to be there, and it might be vacated in a couple of years. But I don't know. I mean, for now they have it, at least today as we sit in 2002. But you look at all the other regional sites. The other regional sites were San Jose, Madison, and Syracuse. Madison, we just play bad and probably historically are going to play bad for a while in Madison. Syracuse, San Jose, like of all the regionals, this was basically a home game. Even against Duke, we had a lot of IU fans there. So I think the fact that, for so many years, we're always annoyed at where we're seated and how we get, we always feel like we get shipped out to the West. We're a 6, 7, 8 seed in the West playing in Boise. It's like this really broke well for us. Not that the teams we were playing, but playing in Rupp and basically having 2 semi-home games, because the one thing you say about this team is we're just not great on the road. So having a home game was huge for an Elite Eight game.
Yeah, no, that's really well said, Scott, and that's a really important point. Chris, were there any other moments that stood out to you before we move on and talk some numbers?
Just some, unorthodox threes being knocked down. It was just kind of like a symbol of what the night was going to be about. Jerod Odell's 3, and then AJ Moye. And, the chant, resonating throughout the stands. I love hearing that. It's been kind of a staple
awesome
all season. I hope that continues in the future with him and some other players, because I see it kind of being a trend-setting thing. But, I think AJ didn't play, a ton of minutes tonight. He did have 9 points, but him on the floor emotionally brings the team forward, and he's going to give it all. And I think just that nod kind of, transitioning from the Duke game to tonight is going to continue to be big, and he's going to need to be that role player moving forward.
I'm glad you mentioned him, because I was actually going to kick off the stat segment talking about AJ, because he only played 8 minutes tonight, but scored 9 points. And he had that stretch in the first half. Indiana's up 15. Coverdale, Coverdale had scored 10 straight points for Indiana, put us up 29-14. Moye comes in, immediately gets a nice drive to the bucket, and just goes crazy, as you would expect from AJ Moye. And then a possession later, he gets the ball over on the left wing and drains a 3, and we're up by 20. And then that's when the chant is going, and he's getting into it, and you can tell everybody just feeds off of him. The players feed off of him, the fans feed off him, everybody does. And so, even though he didn't play it, and then, he goes down and knocks down 4 straight free throws at the end of the game, to ice it and put it away. And so, his contribution, obviously, in the Duke game was much bigger. I mean, he came in for that stretch in the second half. I mean, he put Indiana on his back for a 3-4 minute stretch. And then, obviously, the block, and Indiana didn't need him to do that tonight, but you saw that human spark plug capability that he has, when you need kind of that little juice of energy and just some irrational confidence, you're going to get it from AJ Moye, which is why he's becoming such a fan favorite. So numbers-wise, I don't know what stood out to you guys, but, to me, you look at it, Indiana shoots 78.9% from three-point range, 15 of 19, 57.1% from the free throw line, 12 of 21. I mean, I don't know if you're ever going to see a bigger disparity between three-point percentage and free throw percentage than that. But obviously
52% from the field, 52% from 2. I mean, that's...
and it's one game after, I think Indiana was, 2 for 10 in the Duke game? So Kent State's philosophy of let Indiana shoot some threes might have looked okay for that game. But look, this is a 40% three-point shooting team for the season. This is one of the top 10 three-point shooting teams in the country. Not only were we not going to only take 10 threes, in a game again, probably, we weren't going to only make 2 of them. And so it was nice. I don't know if I would say this is water finding its level, because 15 of 19 is insane and unsustainable, but it was a nice bounce back from what we saw in that Duke game. And I hope every Indiana team that we watch is able to just be competent from the 3-point line. If you can be amazing like this, that's great, but just be competent. That's all we ask. But also,
the other number too is if you look at Kent State's 3-point shooting, I mean, 2 for 14. I bet if we play them 10 times, they don't shoot that bad. 10 games in a row.
Yeah. Although, I definitely think you're right. I also give our defense some credit, because I thought we were out. There were some good closeouts. They didn't have just a ton of wide open ones that they were missing, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. They're probably not going to shoot that badly most of the time. 2 guys with 7 assists. Hornsby and Coverdale both with 7 assists. The ball was moving, and obviously it helps you get assists when guys are making shots. But that's always good for this Indiana team to have more assists than turnovers, because they've been a team that have been known, obviously, to turn the ball over. Chris, what numbers stood out to you?
The rebounding thing is a little bit of a concern for me, because we were out rebounded by 6 by an undersized Kent State team, and Oklahoma is going to give us all kinds of trouble inside and out, and that concerns me. I could potentially see a lot more Jeff Newton against Oklahoma than Jerod Odell.
Ooh, that'd be interesting.
That would be interesting. Odell's a senior leader, but he is a little bit undersized compared to someone like Newton. And, the one thing moving forward, you got two guys on our team that are from Atlanta, and playing in Georgia, playing in their home state is going to be very emotionally charged for them. And I think that's going to make a big impact for Moye and for Newton to play in their home state in front of their families. I don't think you can ask for a better scenario for those two.
No, Newton and Moye are going home to Atlanta, and Indiana's going home to the Final Four. We're all back where we feel comfortable. So that is definitely a good thing. Oh, shoot, there was one other number that I was going to mention. I forgot what it was. Scott, were there any other numbers that jumped out to you?
I knew you were going to take it to me.
No, I was going to say, I know what I was going to say, Chris, is, you're right about the rebounding being a concern tonight, but that's, one game after a really good rebounding performance against Duke. I mean, obviously we gave up, 12 or 13 offensive rebounds to them. No, whatever it was. Yeah, they had 16 offensive rebounds, but we had 20 in that game, and really dominated them overall with, we had 26 defensive rebounds, so I mean, really did a good job rebounding that game. But you're right, tonight, a little bit leakier defensively
when you're hitting that many shots.
Yeah, certainly there were going to be fewer offensive rebounds there to get. Sure. That's for sure. Scott, numbers.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, you're going to throw it to me. You guys have talked about 2-point shooting, 3-point shooting, rebounding, free throws, assists, points, minutes played. So, not much left, because in the world we live in, those are all the stats that exist. There are no other advanced statistics. I will say there's only one other number that matters, man. 4. There's 4 teams left, baby, and we're one of them. Final 4.
To the Final 4. The other number is 3, which is the number of different ways that Dick Enberg referred to Dane Fife. At one point, he called him Dana Fife. At another point, called him Dan Fife. And then occasionally actually referred to him as Dane Fife. That's the player of the game, sir. Let's get his name right. Come on.
He also called him Hornsby once, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, that's Dick Enberg. He's a legend, but come on.
He called him O.J. Moye in the Duke game and A.J. Moye in this game.
Well, it happens.
IU alum, too. Come on now.
He is. I know. Come on. We got to get that right.
I mean, Dick, you got to get it right, this Nick's, like the old English hut pizza place. Like, come on, Dick, come on. You've been here.
I still think we're going to make it tonight, Scott. I think we'll have time to get there, too, by the way. I feel confident.
Order us a pizza at the Pizza Old English Hut Pizza House.
Hey, last question for you guys before we move on to our last segment and hand out our game balls. I know this is going to seem crazy, but given Mike Davis's coaching background and some of the success that he's having and the style that he coaches, which is clearly much different than what we saw under Coach Knight, if this success continues, how much risk are we to potentially lose him to the NBA? Because I feel like those conversations are going to start the way we're playing and the success that we're having.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I had the luxury first semester of taking his coaching of basketball course at Assembly Hall. It was coached primarily by Dan Block, his director of basketball operations, but we had a couple times when we were out on the floor with him, and he was kind of showing us the offense that he was running, which I think is very suited for the next level in a lot of ways. But we had a Q&A session with him, and the first question that was posed to the coach was, what was his career aspirations? And before the question was finished, he said NBA. And he didn't even hesitate. It wasn't as if he had to think about it. He said, NBA, I want to coach in the NBA. And that was it. He didn't have to clarify. He didn't have to elaborate any further. So, it's possible that, the quick success he's having at Indiana, at a program where he's doubted himself as being the right fit. Who knows? It could be something where we could see, if we continue to advance farther against Oklahoma and beyond. It's hard to tell what his future could be at Indiana.
And we know help is on the way. So, I mean, certainly it seems like the good times will keep rolling for Indiana. So,
I mean, Jerod, what are you doing, man? I'm normally the one who, poops on good points and kind of kills the message. I mean, we're going to the Final Four. You're talking about losing our coach?
No,
I mean,
but it's a good thing. No, I'm just saying, look
about football. It's a good thing. Basketball. But
what I'm saying is, Mike Davis was thrust into this role. You know what I mean? And so if his aspiration is the NBA, the only way he's going to get there is by us having great success. That's what I'm saying. Look, Mike Davis is doing an amazing job. Like, sign that guy to a contract extension right now based on what he's doing. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, I feel like I've heard some of those conversations in private. I feel like some of those conversations will start to be had, and if that's the price you have to pay to go to a Final Four and have some of the success that it looks like we're going to have now, I'm just saying, look, look where we are. We're about to go to the Final Four, and we're talking about maybe losing our coach to the NBA. This is incredible. It's just it's all part of it. So that's all I'm saying.
I've heard too. Like, I mean, I'll just say this. Like, I don't go out on a limb very often. But I mean, it is 2002. We just got from the game. Chris and I are going to drive back. But there's a kid who's an intern at Eli Lilly named Brad Stevens. So I mean, like, if we lose Davis, I think we should probably go after this kid. Like, I talked to him a couple days ago. He seems to know a little bit of basketball. Like, not a great pedigree, but just think about it.
Hey, let's not forget, we're facing a really good coach next game, a guy named Kelvin Sampson.
That's true.
I mean, but he coaches in a style that would never work at a place like Indiana. The way he does things would never work at a place like Indiana. Like, we are never going to hire somebody like that. Yeah, I mean, that is not what we do. That's not the way we roll. We don't have big heads behind the basket. We're not doing crap like that. We are just a straight basketball program with Mike Davis as our coach.
Let's enjoy Coach Davis as long as we have him. Let's enjoy these wins. And if he's able to move on to the greener pastures of the NBA, the Indiana job, if that happens, what he will have done.
The Vancouver Grizzlies. I mean, they're a great team. He can go to Vancouver, have a great time up there.
I'm just saying, if that happens, what he's done because look, what we're going to have to find out from Coach Davis is, can he recruit and build his own rosters? Because, the reality is, this is a roster that was built by Coach Knight. A lot of these guys came to play for Coach Knight, and it's a shame that we're not getting to see what he could have done with them. But, based on his last 5 or 6 years, there was nothing really to suggest that he would have done this. And so this team really is blossoming under Coach Davis, and he's kind of stabilized things that were really rocked to their core. And so, we'll see where it goes from here. But the main point in this is just, again, to tip our caps to him for doing a great job, keeping this thing together and leading these guys to a place that we haven't been in a decade.
Yeah.
And man, I'm glad to be going back. It is going to be so much fun. All right, coming up on the assembly call, we are going to hand out our game balls, and then we will break the fourth wall and step out of this conversation, talk about what aged the best and worst from this game, try to put it into proper historical context, and just have some more fun. That's all next here on the assembly call. Stick with us.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if Jordan Halls had ever had a chance to play in an Elite Eight game, that he would have shot like this too. Would have happened.
His brother's a good friend of mine. I don't know how you worked this in. I need to talk to Jay about that.
Just have a sixth sense for these things.
Sketchy to me.
You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember to catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. While you're there, make sure that you sign up for our free IU Hoops email newsletter. Over 7,000 of your fellow IU fans have subscribed. You can also text IU to 66866 to subscribe to the newsletter. That is IU to 66866. I'm Jerod Morse here with Chris Williams from IU Artifacts and Scott Caulfield from Crimson Cast. Guys, I think we did a pretty good job for those two segments, staying in character, staying in the moment of 2002. There's no, 45 minutes past the game? I was on Kirkwood going crazy by now. I remember as soon as the game ended, we watched it at a friend's house and we just sprinted there. And the place was packed, just wall to wall with people. So that's what I was actually doing after this game. But we did a good job staying character. Now we can kind of step out and try to put this into some context. But let's start with game balls real quick. Scott, who gets your game ball for this one? Because I think there's actually a lot of different directions you could go.
Yeah, I mean, the easy money's on Coverdale. I'm going to take Dane Fife because I think what he did defensively early, he played Gates hard, and then just in a simple fact, I mean, he had the most points. If we're going to go by 2002 stats, you take that. But also, I mean, just in the idea that like he shot 83% from three and took 6 of them. He had a great game. He was all over the place. But I'm with you. There's in all of these rewatches, it's kind of been like, oh, it's Calvert Chaney. It's like that's been the answer for like 5 rewatches. I mean, this is one where I think there's like 3 to 4 different answers, and none of them are wrong.
I agree with you on Fife. I think Coverdale would have been a great choice, and I thought he was the best player on the court in the first half, and I think his defense was really good too. I mean, obviously he's going to get beaten off the dribble sometimes, but he was a really tough physical defensive presence. But I thought what Fife brought early in the game, the tone that he set defensively, and then again, that moment is just indelible to me with the score 59-51. Gates makes the one free throw, or maybe he missed the first one, but right before he's about to take the second free throw, Dane Fife kind of comes over, and I don't know if he was doing this to pump everybody up, if it was one of his little things that he was doing to get in Gates' head, because he came over and he's clapping his hands right by where Gates is about to shoot the free throw. But it looked like he was like trying to will everybody, like, let's go. This is slipping away from us here. We've worked too hard to build this, and then the next possession he goes down and hits that three. I mean, that so many times we've seen guys blossom as seniors, and even with the big pedigrees like a Fife who came in as a McDonald's All-American, and you struggle and you struggle and you struggle, and just for him, it's never seemed like he's felt comfortable offensively. And then to do that, and in the biggest moment of the season so far, probably the biggest offensive possession he's had, where it's like, hey, we're in the Elite Eight, we need to score here to keep this going and go to the Final Four, and he steps up and drains it. It was a triumphant moment for a guy as a senior late in his career. And so, even though other guys did more stuff with the counting stats, had more rebounds and assists and all that, you're right. He led the team in scoring, and I thought he had the biggest play. And he was just a leader out there. And it's great to see that from Dane Fife, who really has just come into his own as a senior. So I guess the official game ball is going to Dane Fife. Chris, do you want to throw in an honorable mention vote for somebody else?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kyle Hornsby, who was nice enough to give me his jersey after the game. He threw it up to me in the stands.
Wait, where is that jersey from, though?
This is the one he wore in that game.
That is the actual one that he wore in that game?
That's the actual one that he wore.
Man, that's awesome.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Hornsby's kind of the more unheralded guard on this team, but he goes 4 for 5. Ties with Coverdale with 7 assists. I mean, he's a glue guy to me. He's kind of like the calm guy on the floor. To me, he stepped in and hit the shots as you expected it to him. He was shooting over 40% on the entire season. But I think he's one of the more unheralded guys on this team, and he deserves it just as much as Fife. I think Fife's plays at key moments was crucial, but having that scoring option tonight was huge.
Yeah, man, what a game! I have just so many fond memories of this entire run that Indiana had, because I was obviously on campus. I think this was my junior year, and it was just so much fun, And it's one of those, and I think everybody who's gone, who's been to Indiana. I mean, most people who go to Indiana, certainly up until that point, had experienced something like this, and that's always my thing with new people who go to Indiana and go through it, is I want them to just be able to experience this once, a great team, a great run like this, even though some of the basketball surrounding it was, really up and down, and there were some moments that weren't very good. Like this 3-week stretch was unbelievable. And I feel, even though I wasn't there for a national championship, obviously, I feel like I got a taste of what it's like being a student there with this happening, and so I loved watching this game. I love thinking about this entire run, because it's easily the best 3 weeks that I spent at IU. There's just nothing can top that kind of collective emotion and everybody kind of pulling together, and just everywhere you go, everybody's just excited. And there's something about a run like this, especially at a school like Indiana where basketball means so much. It just brings everybody together and you just have these indelible emotional feelings and experiences that are just, I don't really know what else in college can bring that. So
yeah, I mean, I graduated in 2000. I moved to Houston in 2001 to start teaching at the time. And so this was my first season away from IU. And I remember trying to listen to the Indiana Louisville game that year, on a weird, real media player, trying to listen to Fisher in the game. I was able to pull it up on my dial up modem. It was insane. But I was kind of pissed. I'm there for 15 years. And now, I mean, I got the Cheney run. I got 80. I was a little bit younger in 87. So I didn't fully get it, but it's it was like I leave, then this happens the next year. I mean, enough so that I flew from Houston to Louisville, drove down to meet my dad for the game in Lexington, and then I flew back the next weekend just to be in Bloomington to watch the game with my parents, just to watch the Final Four game, and then I had to go back to work on Monday. It's like I flew back and forth twice just to be there for it. So I was downtown after we beat Oklahoma to go to the final game. I mean, it was an awesome run, and really, I mean, I have a couple hypotheticals I want to ask, but it's like, it is just crazy to think back. Like I was listening to your rewatch on Friday, how that was kind of the last sustained excellence, that, 92, 93, 90, that Chaney years team.
Yeah. And
then it's like, we've had two spikes since then. Like this was a spike. And then we had the spike in the, Zeller, Oladipo years. It's like, that's it. Like, it's crazy to think too, when Dick Enberg is like, God, it's been 10 years since you've been there. It's like, well, now it's been 18. Like, I remember at that point thinking, like, this has been a long time, 10 years. Like, this felt like forever. And
it did.
God, I would take 10 years now.
And it felt like it was going to last. Like, that's the thing about this run and 2013. In the moment when it's happening, it didn't feel like it was going to come and go. It felt like, hey, because we had good recruits coming in, and I mean, everybody's riding this high of like, hey, maybe Davis is up to the task. And obviously there were imperfections and stuff, and you get caught up in the moment of an NCAA tournament run. But man, it felt like, hey, okay, we're back. And as we know, over the last 25 years, it's been a series of kind of false starts, and it kind of bubbles up for a short time and then comes back down. And obviously we know what happened after this. But my goodness, in the moment, it felt like, here we go. Okay. Time and maybe kind of passed Coach Knight by, and even though the way that it went down, it wasn't so good. But look at this. 2 years later, clearly the players were just kind of buckling under the pressure of Coach Knight and fading at the end of the seasons. And they needed more freedom on offense. Like, these were all the narratives that people were talking about openly, which I don't think, and as we get into what's aged the best and what's aged the worst, I think some of those talking points have aged the worst. And it was interesting. It was interesting to hear Dane Fife talk about him too on the Hoosier Hysterics podcast, because they asked him that question. Is there any truth to any of that? And he's just like, it was all crap. There were other reasons why this team won, and again, obviously we would see some of the limitations. We all love Coach Davis, but we would see some of his limitations as a coach in future seasons. But that was the thing about the moment, man. It felt like it was going to last, and I guess that's the other thing that has aged the worst, is that feeling of optimism in the moment about this new era of IU basketball, because it was built for this great moment, but unfortunately it wasn't built to last.
So the first question I have kind of leads into that. I got three questions for you guys.
Yeah.
But, the number one question is, what does this team do with Knight? And I'm happy you mentioned, Jerod, kind of that narrative, because it is something that even at the time I was probably buying into a little bit, just as like, oh, it's passed Knight by. But if you look at the, you look at the last couple of years with Knight, the adjusted offense for Knight starting in 97, 26th in the country, 21st, 19th, and then 15th in that 2000 year, his last year. Adjusted defense was 71st, 75th, 54th, and 28th. I mean, that 2000 team, which was a 6 seed and didn't do very well, like, they were 15th in the country in adjusted offense and 28th in defense. I mean, and it's something that Gail and I have talked about, and you see with all these other podcasts, like, Knight was not a straight line coach. He was a roller, more than people think. Like, he was kind of an up and down guy. You had the 76 team, and then it went down. You had the 81 team, and then it went down. You had the 87 team, it went down. You had the 92 stretch, and then he went down. Like, he was building back up for this one last run. And so I'll pose it to you guys, but I do agree. You start looking at the numbers. Like, he was building this team for this spot right here. The things you have to understand for those who are kind of newer to IU basketball and to Assembly Call is like, I think the two things you can add to this is like Kirk Hastings would have been on this team had Knight been there. Like, that is just, I'm 95% sure. And then Sean May would have come to IU had Knight been there as well. So those two are two variables I think you have to add in there. But I'll ask it to you guys. My first question is, if Knight is coaching this team, do they make this run or do they win the national title?
Chris, why don't you take it first?
Well, the Hastings thing is intriguing. I think that's one of the more what-if situations. If you had another interior scorer who had the ability to step out, because his three-point shooting blossomed that 2001 season, and he had the skyhook shot that I can still vision.
How would you stop this team with Hastings? Good Lord.
That's the thing. Scott makes a great point that, Hastings, just loved Knight. he's written a book about it, how much he loves Knight. And he was obviously a father figure to him. If he does stay, if they get the right draw, the one thing that I keep reminding people of who talk about this is that the draw we had was really good. We beat a really bad Utah team. We beat a UNC Wilmington team that we barely scraped by, but they had an upset. We beat Duke, and then we beat a Kent State team that was riding this wave of wins like we talked about earlier, but had no chance against Indiana.
But let's also remember about that Duke team. That is the only team in the Ken Pom era to be number one in adjusted offense and defense. So, I mean, just having to go through them makes road incredibly tough.
The Duke thing is it's an anomaly, I think. That game, all the right pieces fell in place given the numbers, how bad we shot from three, how many turnovers we had. On paper, you don't win that game. But to me,
it's true.
I don't know. The Knight rationale there is interesting because if they do go deep, Sean May graduates in 2002. He's undoubtedly going to go to IU because, his dad and Knight are thick as thieves. And that to me, it plays in a really interesting segue here, but Hastings' impact in the right way with Davis's system could have meant the difference between being a 5 seed versus being a 1 seed that season. Quite possibly.
Yeah. Scott, I would say, in the moment, taking myself back to 2002, I know exactly how I would have answered that question, which is, again, as we all thought, a lot of us believed in those narratives. And I think one of the, Galen has really done a great job, I think, over the past couple of years of reminding people of the flaws in those narratives, which is not that the game had passed Coach Knight by. It's that recruiting and roster building, he wasn't as into it, and it's like he had gotten back into it. And this was the kind of roster that he was building. Like you looked, as you mentioned, before 1993, it would be these 5 or 6 year cycles. And Indiana had kind of gotten out of that because these big recruits like Collier and Recker and Reed and all these guys end up transferring, and you're trying to plug holes with JUCO guys, and it's just nothing fit. And it's like now you're getting the pieces back to where it's going to fit, where you've got an elite player like Jeffries and you've got guys who can shoot around him. You've got the point guard that you need in Tom Coverdale. And so, look, obviously making it to the championship game, Bob Knight never lost a championship game. So you get me to the championship game with Coach Knight, I'm taking my chances and feeling pretty good about it. Who knows for sure if they would have done it, but I think I feel much more confident now saying that they would have with the perspective of time and really understand. Because when I was in college, I didn't understand really what was all going on, but now understanding it a little bit more with the perspective of time. I do think there's an argument to be made that this particular group of players might have functioned better in Mike Davis's offensive system, but I feel it's easy to make that because we saw it. And that would mean what they wouldn't have functioned in the system of one of the best offensive minds in the history of basketball. Like Bob Knight wouldn't have figured out how to make an elite offense out of this. So I don't know, man. I mean, these players.
If you look at Knight too, is like, and I agree with you, Jerod, and all that. But it's like I also think too, like maybe Davis just had that kind of space guys out stuff. But I went back and started looking at the numbers, like every year after AJ Guyton's freshman year, he shot over 183s. The year that him and Recker were together, it was like AJ Guyton had like 183s and Recker had like 172. So like Knight was moving toward that, like, hey man, if you can shoot, you got a green light. So
and you know what really plagued those teams? What really plagued those teams at the end of Knight's career is you didn't have a lot of rugged, tough defensive players. You had skilled offensive guys like Patterson and Recker and Guyton and really good players, but you didn't have the toughness on the other end. This group had that, and they were going to have that whether Knight was coaching or Davis was coaching. And so you combine that then with their ability to shoot, again, I mean, this team made it all the way to the championship game. Knight would have been hard-pressed no matter what to do that. But I think now I'm much more by that. If not, I would have obviously loved to see what Knight could have done with this group of players because it felt like he was building a roster much like he had previously been doing, and that was the bigger mistake over in the the interim between 93 and 2002. Not that the game had passed him by or that he couldn't coach today's athletes. He just had to get the right group, and this group in 2002, I think that they had the right type of mindset. So. Would love to be able to.
It's a bummer because if you give Knight that title it changes the narrative probably even more than the 93 title, because now it's like, all right, he's made a Final Four in like 4 different eras. Now it's like the game hasn't passed him by. Now he's got 4 titles. He could probably retire just right then on top. If he wins this way, shooting a bunch of threes and D, it's like we look back now, it's like, my God, he was not only didn't pass him by, like he's revolutionary. I mean, that is one of the things that I have underage the best is like, you watch this system, it's like, this is basketball today. Like, yeah. I mean, there's guys out there, they're all spreading the court. They're passing it inside. One weird corollary, you mentioned this about Coverdale. I'm watching the game, and it's like, in a weird way, as a very crazy comp, it's like Coverdale's like a real early James Harden. Like, he takes a bunch of threes, he drives and gets to the line. That's kind of all he does, like in a great way. I mean, the only thing is that he passes. Like, Harden doesn't pass. But it's like Coverdale was like an early James Harden who just took a bunch of threes and drove. But yeah, I mean, if Knight wins with this system, we're looking back and it's like, my God, Knight was ahead of the curve. Like Knight won the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and now won with this. It's an absolute bummer.
If you want to throw hypotheticals out there, I mean, if Tom Coverdale was playing as well as anybody he was one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, so if he's not hurt, that was my other.
If he doesn't get hurt, now what happens? If Davis has a national championship, which is, we made it to the championship game, yep. And I think we all think with a healthy Coverdale, that's a much different game. Now how much different are things? Maybe
yep. You took, those are my last 2 hypotheticals. If Coverdale isn't hurt, do we win? No. They're great questions. And what happens if Davis wins the title? I mean, I want to hear Chris's answer. I'm curious how Chris would put this in the context, because I think things probably end similarly for, like, it's funny, in one of the last pods I've done, I think either with Galen or the last rewatch, like, the discussion of like what happens if we win that 92 or 93 title is kind of like, probably the next couple of years are similar, because Knight had this he kind of took off from recruiting after that Chaney years, and he would have done the same if he won the title, because that was his history. So it's like, we probably would have had the same teams for like 94 to 96. I kind of feel like, to answer the question, I think the next couple of years kind of go the same for Davis. He just might have a little bit of like a longer leash. But that's my feel, but I want to hear Chris's take on it.
Well, Galen and I actually did a podcast today, and we talked about this very thing, but I'm not going to – it's a good listen, so you guys should listen to it. I think about who was on this roster in terms of, you had 5 Mr. Basketballs on this roster. You had a lot of Indiana players. You had a lot of really tough players, hard-nosed players that Knight had largely recruited. But when you get into the next era, you get the next recruiting class coming in. You got a guy like Bracy Wright. You got a guy like Marshall Strickland. You're getting the players because Davis was a good recruiter, but also, we had just went to the national title game, and that was going to sustain some success. I don't know. I don't know if it would have made much of a difference either, because I think in the end, if you looked at his recruiting, it was all over the place. Davis's recruiting ability was a huge question mark to me, because he would get guys that you would think come in and be instant successes, and they would completely just fall apart. And then you would get guys that were on the roster that made absolutely no sense. You take a stab with a guy like Patrick Ewing Jr., who has the athletic ability out the gym, but could not be a consistent scorer, and then he transfers. And then you get guys like Ben Allen from Australia, who, to me, that's still one of the oddest recruits we've ever had. And he was a gifted player, but he didn't want to play inside. And then you get these random guys like Daryl Pigram and Justin Gray Ashley and Sim Dink and Lucas Stein, these guys that make no sense on this roster. And if you look at what those rosters were made up of, they didn't have a lot of Indiana players, because Davis dropped the ball. The famous story, Titus talked about this recently on his podcast, and it's something that Indiana people, if you don't know, it's very common knowledge that when Greg Oden and Mike Connolly were at Lawrence North High School being recruited, it was a guarantee that they were going to come to Bloomington. But Davis screwed up and addressed recruiting letters to a different player that ended up in the envelope addressed to Mike Connolly. And this was something that happened frequently and was not caught. And so I think in a lot of ways that you could argue with Crean toward the end, he burned bridges in Indiana, and so did Davis. And I think, to me, that it plays a huge role in why we had a descent that really hit rock bottom, in that 4-5 season. And then we go through that god-awful game against Vanderbilt at home, the NIT, which is the most miserable game that I've ever been to in my life. And unbeknownst to me, I'm sitting in the same row as Galen Clavio that I don't even know at the time. So it was – I don't see it – we're at the pinnacle here. We're at the pinnacle here with a group of guys.
Yep.
We have several leaving. We have Jeffries departing. We have Odell and Fife graduating. We have Cub for one more season. We have Moye for 2 more seasons. Is it going to be – I just don't see it sustaining a lot really due to the personnel and the inability of Davis to recruit consistently, which is a narrative we've talked about a lot.
Our department can catch every secondary violation that we make and put ourselves on probation. We can't check the damn recruiting envelopes and make sure that the right ones go in there. Like, come on, let's get compliance with common sense.
Don't
folks.
check all of them. Just check Odin and Conley.
Maybe I don't
give a shit. I don't give a shit about anybody else's. Like just those guys.
Deal.
Hey, the 7-foot dude who's tearing it up in Indianapolis. Let's worry about him.
How about just go up in person every time instead of having to use the postal service or bank on the fact that you know. Yeah. That was a guarantee. They wanted to play for Davis. It's a well-known fact, and it was screwed up royally.
Yeah,
That's the biggest one.
I don't think anything actually changes with the results of the next few Davis seasons if they win this game. You just wonder if it's a lot harder to move on from him when Indiana did, but it was still 4 or 5 years later. And I will also say this: I don't want to just breeze past this and say, oh yeah, we for sure win the title game if Coverdale doesn't get hurt. That Maryland team was awesome. They were 32-4. I mean, they had Dixon, Blake, Lonnie Baxter, Mouton, Wilcox. I mean, they were really going to present a lot of problems no matter what. And, Coverdale did play. He played 32 minutes.
The year before.
Yeah, now he was a shell of himself, 8 points, 4 turnovers, obviously. And Indiana just really struggled to get anything going that game. I always wonder, maybe AJ should have played a little more of that game. He only played 7 minutes, but... Anyway, by no means was it a given that Indiana would win, but they would have had a fighting chance with a healthy Coverdale because of how well he was playing.
I have absolutely no recollection of the title game because I
watched it at Assembly Hall.
I fell asleep at halftime in we had a dorm party going on in Teeter Whistler, and I had way too many beers. Miller High Life, that our RA snuck in for us. What a great dude! What a great role model. And I was. And I'm thankfully I didn't watch the second half because it would have been depressing and I would have cried.
It was a depressing game. I watched it at Assembly Hall. They had a big watch party at Assembly Hall for all the students. I mean, there was so much excitement, but then by the second half, it's just like we just can't get over the hump, Hornsby though, man, Hornsby stepped it up in the tournament. He was 4 for 8 from downtown in that game.
Yeah.
But anyway, do we hit your other hypotheticals? Do we hit them all?
I got them all.
So, okay, in terms of what age the best, what age the worst? I know we talked about some of it with the offense. Was there anything else there that we hadn't hit, Scott?
I mean, I got some random stuff. So I
still
hit the
random stuff.
I love the courts. Talked about it in the last pod. I love the original courts. I'm doing the 81 title game, which is in the Spectrum, which had the original courts. I love having the old courts, but I do like kind of having the Final Four having a separate court. I love Chris had the jersey up a second. I loved the era where you had the logo right up there in the neck. IU had the little logo above the numbers. Kent State had it too in this game. It was kind of a pretty popular thing, but I like that style. I wish they'd bring that back. I mentioned the 3-and-D. I mean, I mentioned honestly, we played a very progressive style. Looking back, this is how it's crazy how ahead of the curve we were on this. Chris mentioned on Twitter. I was just sitting there watching the game. I was doing a couple notes, and I hear must be The Office in the background. And it's like, oh yeah, Steve Carell in a FedEx ad in 2002. If you want to go back and watch it, it's the minute 49 or the hour 49 mark. It's Steve Carell literally dressed as Michael Scott. Not doing Michael Scott, but it's just doing a FedEx ad. It's great. My last thing is I'm a fan of Survivor. I'm not going to lie, and this is a good promo for Survivor Marquesas, which is the first time Boston Rob was on, and now they're doing the Winners at War season 40 with more Boston Rob. So some good Survivor stuff there.
Chris, what age is the best and or worst for you?
To me, it's top 2 best jerseys we've ever worn. I'm kind of piggybacking on what Scott said and what I mentioned earlier. It's the last season that we have the red and white. We go through this big transition where Michael McNeely, our brilliant athletic director, decides to spend $400,000 to stretch the logo and tells every school, that we have to wear, or every team and program that we have to wear the exact same logo. So the oval is dead officially. The jerseys are great.
RIP.
Yeah, RIP. The baggy shorts are great. It's just amazing that, a guy like Coverdale is wearing a pair of shorts that are probably 4 times too big for him. And a very svelte Tom Coverdale, who actually was good friends
svelte
with our neighbors and came over, and let's just say we had a good time together. Him and who AJ came over a few times, but the guy liked his.
You have any artifacts from that?
Ooh, I have a board. Funny, we have a board somewhere. One of my roommates has it that was signed by everybody who ever visited our home, and there are 8 IU basketball players on that. I'll have to find it and post a picture of it.
That would be cool.
My current wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, Tom Coverdale is like high on her list of like people who she's allowed to cheat with. Like she has the hots for the 2002 Tom Coverdale version of Tom Coverdale.
How high is the 2002 version of Tom Coverdale on your own personal list, Scott? That's the question.
As a point guard, I love him. I mean, yeah.
The other thing,
for me, it's 96 Brittany. I'm a big fan of 96 Brittany and 02 Cameron. 02 would be Cameron Diaz. That'd be the vintage of 02 I'd go.
Yeah.
There was a great Saab commercial in the first part, like the first or second commercial break. And the guy who's at the Saab dealership is a total asshole. And made me think of, and I'm not offending anybody out there. I'm not trying to, if you're a Saab owner and a great person, but the only 2 other people I've ever known in my life who were Saab owners were total assholes. So it just made me think of how much that is age. The age bad. I get sad. I get so sad watching this. I think about, that was, we all have our time. If you were there in 87, like Coach was, or 81 or 76, I was hoping for this to be the moment, and it wasn't. And looking back, as Scott has said, it's been 18 years. That just makes me so sad. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that I get depressed about and think, what could have been. Even if the rest of his entire tenure was a tank, we had that title. We wouldn't have to think about, 87. We wouldn't have to hear about every freaking Purdue fan saying, it's been 87, 87, 87. That to me would have been that's the hardest thing to think about.
87 is better than never. It's always an easy comeback to Purdue fans.
Yeah. and the Purdue fans who want to bring up the national title in 32, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. So don't even go there.
No. One other thing that aged the best for me coming out of this game, and here to go back, Scott, to what you said earlier, kind of the hypotheticals. Here's what we don't know, because what aged the best for me was the camaraderie of this team. This team, they were so tight, and you can even see it since. I mean, while we were doing the rewatch, Dane Fife is live tweeting the game. Jerod Jeffries is live tweeting. Like, we've seen pictures from, meetups that these guys have had. Like, there's a real, and you can tell when you hear interviews with these guys where they talk about each other, how close they all are. Jeff Newton, George Leach are out, working together, and there's just, there was just such a trust, such an affinity between these guys. And maybe it would have been there anyway, but you have to think that what they went through when Coach Knight got fired and how they kind of, for a time, while everything is crumbling around them, all they had was each other. And look, like, that stuff matters with basketball. Trust off the court can lead to trust on the court and vice versa. And I thought that you had a team, we speak in such glowing terms of this 0-2 team, and with good reason, because they went to the final game. But as you said, Scott, they struggled on the road. They were 25-12. Like, this was one of those seasons that probably had Indiana fans, hair and knots all throughout the season, because it's like, we know the town is there. This team should be better. And they came together at the end of the season, and that's what we don't know. Did they need what they went through to get the camaraderie that allowed them to come back against Duke, that allowed them to beat Oklahoma with a hobbled Tom Coverdale? That's what we'll never know, because, that wouldn't have happened if Coach Knight had stayed there. Now, maybe they build the closeness, in other ways, but I think that's why people love, in addition to the fact that they won these games, but watching the Duke game, watching this game, you can tell this is a tight team that really enjoyed playing together. And it's so much more fun to watch when the guys just look like they're out there playing for one another, not just for themselves, and not every team is like that. Not even every good team is like that, but this team definitely was. And that, to me, is one of the things that has aged the best about this team, in the ensuing 18 years. To you, Scott. I know you had another one.
I have a couple age poorlies, and then I'll be quick because I know we're getting long here. I did love the ads for AOL.com. That was great to see. It's funny. I had in my age poorly the Saab ad. So it's funny that Chris mentioned on the pods. I'm like, I wrote down who the hell buys a Saab. No offense to anybody who bought one, but it's like, I know Saturn and Neon were cars at the time that I knew people who owned, but it's like, I've never known anybody to buy a Saab. The ads for Des to Smoochie. I remember that. It's like, I love, I love like from the devious mind of Danny DeVito. It's like, you mean the guy who was in Twins with Arnold Schwarzenegger, like his devious mind. We talked about the Old English hut to Dick Enberg. It's like, come on. But here's what I would say, the kind of age, oddly, I thought about this a little bit. This was the only year where we could have played Bob Knight in the NCAA tournament. When he had Texas Tech in and we were in it the same year. The next year, Texas Tech wasn't in it. Then we weren't in it the next couple of years. And I didn't know where to put this, but just kind of pointing it out there. I'm very surprised the committee didn't at least put us in the same bracket, hoping that maybe some point we'd match up, because that is such an NCAA bracket thing to do, is to put us in the same bracket. I remember thinking that at one point, like once they made the tournament, we did. I was like, oh my God, what if we were 5-6? Like, what if they seeded us in such a way? So just throwing that out there. But I'll say this, like I'm with Chris 100%. Like this, as I watch this game, I think about like going there. I remember all the feelings, like going to the Final Four, how awesome it was. I remember watching the next game, but it's like, I think about the Duke game, but like, it's weird. They all of these go together with me. And so I can't not think about the Maryland game. Like as I'm watching this, all I can think about is like, damn it, we were so close. We didn't get there. And then this just feels like it was all part of, everything was in motion for us to just have a bad 18 years after this. Like everything is set up and you realize like, even if they win, I don't know if Davis is the right coach at the right time. I don't know if this is the right time for him to do it. And it's just, it's melancholy. Like it's awesome seeing, you're like, my God, this is fun to watch. But then it's like, you just know there's a house of cards stacked up, built on this that's just not going to last. And I think that's the really tough thing to do this is to watch this, is even some of those, early 80s and 90s rewatches, you're just like, man, those were good. And it's kind of like, damn, we missed this. But it's like this almost feels more recent. It's like, damn it, like everything that we're dealing with now is kind of like almost birthed around this time. And that's the real bummer of this, is just you kind of see like this was the first of a lot of just bad decisions that were made throughout the time. And yeah, got to give Galen credit. He's the one who started putting me on those, looking at the adjusted offensive and defensive numbers of Knight's last couple of years. And you're like, wow, what could have been. So I don't know. It's fun. It's exciting, but it's like, I can't not take the Maryland game out of it. And then I can't not take knowing what happens the next 18 years, just be like, it sucks that we have two great moments in the last 20 years. And this is one of them.
Yeah. No, you really do have to just stay in the moment when you're rethinking this, and try not to think too much about what comes after it, because in the moment it was spectacular, Yeah. And you're right. For so many of those big Bob Knight moments, it's like, you think about the 81 team and it's like, it was just sandwiched around all this greatness, and it's been a lot fewer and far between for Indiana fans. But, hopefully we have some more of these good times coming in the future. Well, let's get some final thoughts, fellas, and get out of here. This was fun. I got to go get down to Kirkwood. I'm late getting down there for the party. Chris, your final thoughts on Indiana's victory over Kent State?
Whether we were going to be able to sustain a shooting performance like that further on, it was nice to see the shots go down. It was nice to see a moment where everything was clicking. Even at the times when we played poorly, we had some runs of really sloppy play, and we committed some turnovers that were ill-advised. It was fun to see an IU team where everybody was syncing together, where everybody was playing hard, everybody was wanting this. They saw what was in front of them. It'd been the first time in 10 years that this was on the table, and this was what a lot of those kids, a lot of those guys on that team who were from Indiana, watched those players on that 93 team and wanted to be in that situation where they couldn't get to the Final Four, or wanted to revisit what happened in 92 with that team. It was just everything kind of fit together that season. And it was a good victory over a team that was not used to losing. And it was a good revenge to get back on a team that we should have beaten the year before.
Well said. Scott?
Yeah, I mean, it's just there's so many question marks to it. Jerod, as you were talking about how close this team was, I think you're right. And it gets me wondering, we do all these hypotheticals, but it's like, did this team have to go through that traumatic event of the night firing to build the unit that became the team that went to the Final Four? It's like, if that doesn't happen, maybe they're not as cohesive a unit that can then get to the Final Four. It's like, there's so many question marks. Of course, the question is, if Coverdale gets hurt, how does Knight coach this team? Is he coaching better or worse? With Haston there, like, there's so many question marks there. But overall, this is one of those. It's just such a little flash in the pan. And it's unlike so many of the other runs we had where everything else kind of felt like it was building up to it. Like with Zeller Oladipo, you had the year where we beat Kentucky and then we lose in the Sweet 16. Like we come back, we're ranked number one, so we get to be all excited about it. The 92, 93 team, like that was building toward it. The 87 team, that was building toward it. I wasn't old enough in 81, but that seemed to come a little more out of nowhere. But this was really just like we had gone through the firing of Knight. We're all just like, what the hell? And it's like, oh, maybe we're good. Then we got blown out in the, lose to Kent State in the first round. It's like, oh, maybe Davis, this shouldn't be the coach. Like we're just so jumbled. And then it's just like out of nowhere, this run comes based on so many random factors. And then it happens. We beat Duke and it's like, my God. And then it just kind of is, it feels like it's just sand through your fingers. It's like, wow, that was awesome. And then nothing was building up to it and nothing really built from it. It was just a insane little blip that just isn't standard with IU basketball, but unfortunately like it is. And I was thinking too, it's like, my God, this is our last Elite Eight game. Like this is, I know it is, but it's like when we're talking about trying to do Elite Eight games, it's like everything else we'd have to do would be past before this. So, I mean, that's where it's a bummer, but I will end on the positive. I mean, Jerod, you're right. Like this was so much damn fun to live through. Like going on a Final Four run is awesome. God, I hope we can do it again at some point close in our lifetime because it is a lot of fun. For those of us who've been there, it'd be great to do it again. I would buy so much stuff. I bought so much junk from this Atlanta one, and I would buy way more from the next one. But no, this has been it's been a blast. It's been fun seeing teams play like that. And again, I was just most surprised at how much it looked like basketball today compared to the other rewatches we've done.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, it was fun. It was a totally different experience watching this team play offense than, the last couple or the game that we did from the Louisville game in the round of 32 and then, watching the LSU game. It's such a different experience. But, what this season was such a testament to the importance of two things. One is roster construction. It's so important to have a roster where the pieces fit together. This team only had, obviously it had one guy that played in the NBA, right? Yeah, only Jeffries played in the NBA. Obviously, Jeff Newton became like the best player in the history of Japan, but only Jeffries played in the NBA. Coverdale was obviously a great college point guard, and then you had guys around them that filled their roles. Kyle Hornsby, one of the best role players we've seen. Dane Fife, one of the best role players we've seen. Newton, Moye, Odell. This team fit together. They had that cohesion, and so you were able to have one star player, one elite talent like Jerod Jeffries, and build guys around him, and they became a really good team. Now, was this one of the two best teams in the country? No, not given the full body of work. They made the championship game. But that's why the other big lesson from this game is you just have to make the tournament with a good team and give yourself a shot. Because, Indiana, co-Big Ten champions, were they 12-6 in the regular season? Like it was in the history of IU basketball, kind of a ho-hum regular season. But you make the tournament, you get a 5 seed, and what happens when you do that? Well, if you can win one big game, maybe the rest of the bracket opens up for you a little bit, Chris, like you said, and so they had to go through Duke, but that's one game. And when you get in the tournament, anything can happen. And think about all the recent seasons that we haven't even given ourselves the chance. And that is unconscionable at Indiana. I get, we're not going to win the Big Ten every year and have 30 wins every year. And that's fine. I mean, Bob Knight won 30 games, 3 times. And had his own ups and downs. But you got to make the tournament and give yourself a chance, and that's what this team did. And that's why this team is etched into the history of Indiana basketball, because they had a good regular season, got themselves to a 5th seed, and then took advantage of the opportunities, etched one of the most epic victories in IU basketball history, beating that Duke team, coming back the way they did, and then took advantage of what came after it. Got to give yourself the chance. and we haven't seen enough teams in the tournament, and that's where we have to get back to, with Archie Miller or whoever it's going to be, is, you don't have to be a top 10 team every single season, but my goodness, at least be a team that can get yourself a 5-6 seed at a minimum, because even when you do that, you're still going to have a chance to do something in the tournament, and if you do something in the tournament, you can rewrite the entire narrative of a season, which is what this team did. But, to this team's credit, it wasn't just luck. It wasn't just happenstance. They were ready for the moment, whether it's because, they had this incredible togetherness forged in the fires of nights firing, or just because they really came together at the right time. Probably all those things rolled into one, but, it amounted to one of the absolutely most memorable stretches of basketball that we've had in the last 25 years. Something I for sure will never forget, because I was there on campus to relive it. And I'm just, I thank this team for giving this and putting it out there, because now it's in the vault. We can go back and watch it anytime. Now we can be on Twitter and you can see, get Dane Fife's thoughts and get Jerod Jeffrey's thoughts as the game is going on. It's amazing. And that's why these moments are so special, because they never change. And every time you watch the game, 15-3 still go in, and it's still as much fun, and you can put yourself back in the moment and feel those emotions again, which, especially during this time, has been especially useful. So my thanks to those guys for giving us that memory. My thanks to you guys for being here to do this show. And certainly our thanks to everybody who is listening and going on this this journey, going down memory lane. It was funny, my wife walked in. She was outside playing with my daughter while I'm watching the game. And so she comes in and she's like, because she thinks this whole thing is ridiculous. She's like, I can't believe you guys are going back and watching old games. And so she comes back in. She's like, I want you to know, Patrick down the street, he said he spent all day today watching old Texas A&M football games. And then Angie said, Nick, our neighbor from across the street, is going back and watching old sports games today too. I was like, see, this is what everybody's doing to pass the time, because we need our sports. It's like, it's not that crazy. She still thinks it's crazy, but that's okay. At least now I've got some strength in numbers here around the neighborhood.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. We'll be back. Let's see. I don't know if we're going to do Banner Monday with Mike DeCourcy. We might, but we'll definitely be back for Assembly Call Radio on Thursday. And then next week, we're doing Saturday, Monday, because obviously we shift to the Final Four schedule. Saturday, we're doing the IU-UNLV game from 1987. Vintage Bob Knight coaching right there. And then on Monday, we are doing the IU-Michigan 1976 National Championship game. Do you know which shows you guys are on?
I'm doing Michigan on Monday with Coach and Ryan.
Okay. Scott, when's your next appearance?
I'm not back on until the week after, which is, I think, the same three of us.
Yeah, we're doing 81, yeah.
Doing 81?
Yeah, which is like, every time you guys are talking about, putting me and Ryan together, like I feel like this is like your control. You're keeping me in a box. Like, it's like, all right, we gave you one with Coach and Ryan, and it's like, now we're just going to lock you down, like just Jerod and Chris.
Did you feel locked down tonight? I don't want to lock you down.
No.
We want to unleash you, Scott.
No, but I don't get any other pairings. I like you guys. Like, I want to.
So I didn't realize I did the same pairing. I was trying to keep them different. All right, I'm gonna look at this, because I was trying to rotate all the pairings around. So we'll see.
I like the Coach Ryan Scott thing was fun. Seeing
it was
Coach
pretty good.
Keep track of that. That was you put him in to start off in the first round. That's a tough first round matchup for Coach. I'll say that.
You dumbass.
I know, but it was fun. It was fun. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. We will talk to you on another episode. You guys enjoy yourselves. Be safe.
Thank you for doing these. Seriously, thank you for doing these. These are fantastic.
It's been so much fun. But we've both been like thinking about doing this for years and years and years, and this is all it took. Cancel the NCAA tournament, and we will pull out all of our ideas.
Just end the world, and we can do it. That's all you got to do.
Doing it. Hey, but we're lucky to have this many games to do. That's what I mean. Sure. Like, we've had I know the recent stuff hasn't been as good, but man, we have a great catalog of old games to go through.
A&M, So.
Yeah, we could be Purdue, and only have Purdue wouldn't even be able to keep going this far. Well, I guess they did. They made 2 Final Fours, but they're not going to be able to schedule 3 national championship shows and still have 2 left over. So suck on that.
They're not going to find footage of that 32 classic.
No.
No.
No, they're not.
But they could do it. They could definitely do the rewatch of the Big Ten tournament. We can't do. That's the one thing we can't.
That's true. No, no Big Ten tournament rewatches here.
Yeah, no record buzzer beater.
No. I'm just going to take my memory of beating Nebraska and just pretend the Big Ten tournament started this year. That's probably the safest way to do it. All right, guys, have a good night. We will talk to you all next week. See you, everybody.